Are we ready for a national divorce? Do we really want that? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, once again, is talking national divorce. She dropped a thread on that subject 2 days ago, but she isn't the only one talking about it. Furthermore, we hear of active campaigns for interstate and even international secession, and I refer here to the Greater Idaho and Texit movements, respectively. So now would be a good time to review the concept, review her current proposal, and see whether we want that or should want that. Before I begin, I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views. Link in the description. And be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. Lots of great merchandise there. Especially this t-shirt that I have chosen for today, which reads simply, "Freedom isn't free." No, it isn't. And I think Marjorie Taylor Greene, bless her heart, is about to give away the store. Strange as that might sound. One more thing, if you like what you're about to hear, you can like this video. You can also click the bell icon to get a notice every time I come out with a new one. In fact, you see the new icon, the heart shape with the US dollar sign in it? The super thanks icon. If you really want to keep these videos coming, click that and leave me a tip. Any currency will do, so long as it's legal tender. Now then, first let's review. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene first broached the term national divorce on New Year's Eve 2021. Twitter, then being in the dark ages, suspended her account shortly thereafter, allegedly for a different reason, but still. And when they did that, many of her tweets disappeared, but they didn't disappear forever. They have all come back now. As longtime readers will recall, Raghavan started the talk. He dropped a thread saying why he was moving out of San Francisco, California, to Florida. I have a link in the description to the anchor tweet of that thread. Raghavan cited several grounds for moving out. The first was personal danger, and in this context, he quoted the anchor tweet from another thread addressing that problem. I have a link in the description to that anchor tweet. Now, it's pretty shocking what this woman said, but I'll let you click through and read it. There's a lot of ground to cover. Moving on to Mr. Raghavan. He next cited breach of social contract and hostility to business. And in this context, he cited a thread by future Twitter Files journalist Michael Schellenberger, author of San Francisco, his title. I have a link to that in the description to that anchor tweet also. He talked about the business restrictions in San Francisco and about San Francisco giving a pass to people pushing fentanyl on the street. Then Mr. Raghavan observed with shock that San Francisco made Ayn Rand's novel Atlas Shrugged real by deprecating material success. And he summed up, quote, "In summary, the Bay Area, instead of harvesting the golden eggs, bled the magical goose dry," unquote, Harry Raghavan. Result, Harry Raghavan moved to Florida. Naturally, he got advice not to vote for the same policies that ruined San Francisco and the rest of California. He got that from a talk show host, and I have a link to that man's tweet in the description, the Tony Bruno Show. Somebody else shared a migration chart, originally on Twitter, but Twitter suspended the account, and the account is still suspended to this day. But CNAV is hosting it directly, and so if you click through to the article, you can see it there. It shows that California has the most people moving out, Florida the most people moving in, and ranks all the states in between of people moving in or out. Then a gentleman named Pedro Gonzalez shared a thread, link in the description, making the point, rather crudely I must warn you, that those who expected to live in a clean, even automated city are instead living in a filthy war zone. I quote him loosely. Gonzalez also said in the thread that he didn't appreciate Mr. Raghavan's condescending tone about Florida politics. Finally, he proposed, in another tweet, to which I have a link in the description, a moratorium on voting for the blue to red transplants and even a voter's sin tax. Now listen to me. I said before and I will say it again. That would be an unconstitutional bill of attainder that would apply indiscriminately. But Mr. Gonzalez's first proposal recalls the durational residency requirements many states once had. But to let that happen, you'd have to overrule a Supreme Court precedent, Dunn versus Blumstein from 1972, and repeal the specific act of Congress forbidding states to acquire durational residency of their visitors. Title 52, United States Code, Section 10502. Dr. Steve Turley has observed repeatedly that most, though not all, who move from blue states to red do so in full recognition that the blue states' policies ruin those states. So they have no intention of voting blue in a red state. Others might not agree with that, but Dr. Steve says he has the studies to prove what he says. Nevertheless, Representative Greene first mentioned the national divorce concept in response to Mr. Gonzalez's proposal. I have a link in the description to her tweet, in which she did say, and I quote, brainwashed people that move from California and New York really need a cooling off period, close quote. Well, that didn't go over very well. Her colleague, Eric Swalwell of California, called it illustrative of what a Republican-run country looks like, with people losing their right to vote on ideological grounds. First of all, Mr. Swalwell, I accuse you of wanting to do that very thing to us. Second, you're the guy who once threatened nuclear retaliation against those of us who choose to defend our Second Amendment rights. But as to the third and fourth, Representative Greene made those points for me. First, she reminded him that he had fallen into a honey trap with a Chinese spy. Second, she brought up Ray Epps and Scaffold Commander from the J6 event. And now that Tucker Carlson and his producers have access to 41,000 hours of footage, we can hope we'll get some answers on that one. I say hope, but Laura Loomer doesn't agree with that at all. Then she dropped, MTG, that's dropped a 7-part thread. I'm just going to link to the anchor tweet in the description, saying A, she was threatening a national divorce to wake up the other side, and B, national divorce need not equate to civil war. In other words, she wasn't quite ready to call for a national divorce then, but she set forth her grounds. Well, in reply, Representative Ruben Gallego, or maybe that's Gallego, of Arizona, just flat out accused her of treason. I have a link in the description to his tweet. See for yourselves. Now, in all fairness, Marjorie Taylor Greene never said back on New Year's Eve 2021 what she meant by national divorce. 2 days ago, she did. I have links in the description to the odd numbers of a thread she dropped 2 days ago. And I'm going to read it to you. If it sounds like an awful lot to get into a 13-tweet thread, well, it's because she took advantage of the long tweet feature now available to us blue check marks. Thread begins. Why the left and right should consider a national divorce not a civil war, but a legal agreement to separate our ideological and political disagreements by states while maintaining our legal union. Definition of irreconcilable differences. Inability to agree on most things or on important things. Tragically, I think we, the left and right, have reached irreconcilable differences. And I'll speak for the right. All right, and say, we are absolutely disgusted and fed up with the left cramming and forcing their ways on us and our children with no respect for our religion and faith, traditional values, and economic and government policy beliefs. With our federal government in over $34 trillion in debt and on the verge of default, clearly both left and right have proven that together they both aren't responsible with hard-working Americans' tax dollars. A national divorce would require a much smaller federal government with more power given to the states. Hence, we would solve our debt and spending problems immediately. Reducing the federal government would be easy because states would completely control things like education, trade, commerce, and communications to a much larger degree, and the federal government by a much smaller degree. We would immediately alleviate the need for departments like the Department of Education. States would have full control of their public education. Education would look different all over the country. In red states, there would be varying degrees of more traditional public education. Charter schools, homeschooling, technical training, and college and universities. Red states would likely ban all gender lies and confusing theories. Theories that drag queen story times, an alternative lifestyle, indoctrinating teachers, and China's money and influence in our education, while blue states could have government-controlled gender transition schools. Red state schools would bring back prayer in school and require every student to stand for the national anthem and Pledge of Allegiance, while blue states would likely eliminate the anthem and pledge altogether and replace them with anthems and pledges to identity ideologies like the trans flag and Black Lives Matter. Perhaps some blue states would even likely have government-funded Antifa communist training schools. I mean, elected Democrats already support Antifa, so why not? Red states would ban biological males from all girls and women's sports and all girls and women's places of privacy. Red states would maintain the truth that there are only two genders, and it would require the biological identity of each person's gender on their identification. Not how the person identifies. If you choose to identify differently, you can. But if you want it on a legal record, you'll need to move to a blue state in order to be legally free to lie to yourself and others about your identity. Now, I want to take a break here because I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor is oursilverlines.com. Do you feel like you're working harder for your money just to get by? You are not alone. The fluctuating economy, the employment issues, unexpected changes in life have left many families struggling over the last few years. Collecting gold and silver can help shield you against many of these challenges. But if you're like me many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silver Lines helps by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets to creating and protecting true wealth by collecting precious metals. Now, whether you just want to collect rare and unique coins or take advantage of the business opportunities this company provides, either way, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit oursilverlines.com to learn how you can build a legacy for your future. Now, let's get back to the thread. Red states would not have to abide by climate cult lies. Red states would be completely free to build and use fossil fuel energy for their citizens. Oil, natural gas, clean coal, and nuclear power would very likely be growing strong energy sources for red states. Red states would be free from complying with Green New Deal regulations, but obviously all states would still have to comply with certain environmental protective requirements. We love freedom to consume the energy we choose, but not pollution. And just to be clear, carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. Red states would throw out all environmental and social governance regulations and requirements on corporations and businesses. Companies would no longer have to meet FSG scoring measures on anything from hiring to work culture to products. In red states, companies could hire based on work-related qualifications, not identity, and return their focus on their customers. Once again, going back to real customer service and treating the customer like the king. Blue states would likely enforce ESG and require identity to mandate everything, perhaps even what the customers are allowed to consume based on their identity. We already saw Democrats give life-saving monoclonal antibodies to people of color before white people for the treatment of the virus that shall remain nameless. Of course, interstate trade, travel, and state relations would continue. However, in red states, they could have different rules about store product placement on national stores shelves. In red states, I highly doubt Walmart could place sex toys next to children's toothbrushes. The federal government would have to maintain the Department of Defense, but it would need to return to its original purpose. The United States border and our national security would be the border that DoD would defend. The federal government would have to defend the states from invasion, not enable daily invasions. Dangerous international criminal organizations like Mexican cartels that are responsible for murdering Americans, trafficking humans and drugs, and operating deadly gangs inside our country would be dealt with by the United States military. And large grants and public funding to NGOs that fuel the worldwide migration to America would have to end immediately. Sorry, oh no, not sorry, George Soros. Law enforcement would likely look different in red and blue states. Red states would likely have highly supported law enforcement officers and well-funded agencies. Police officers would be well-trained, paid, equipped, and seen as heroes once again, and not portrayed as racist thugs. Red states would also support citizens' rights to bear arms and self-defense. In red states, law-abiding gun owners wouldn't go to jail for shooting an attacker. Their right to self-defense and defense of property would be protected. Crime rates would be very low. Red state citizens would be safe. Criminals would be locked away swiftly where they broke the law. Justice would be served. In blue states, who knows? Police could be anything from unarmed social workers to doing what Democrat lawmakers have been calling for all along, abolishing the police. And in blue states, they would immediately disarm their citizens, of course, because those bad guns get up and kill people by themselves all the time. In a national divorce, the left could achieve their dreams of total and complete lawlessness. We must not ignore how different elections would be between red states and blue states. In red states, they would likely pursue one-day elections with paper ballots and require voter ID with only the red state citizens or even red state taxpayers voting. Red states would not allow illegal aliens to vote, or ballot harvesting, or mass mail-in ballots ripe for fraud, and could ban election machines altogether if they wanted to. And the blue states would be free to allow illegal aliens from all over the world to vote freely and frequently in their elections, like the D.C. Council wants. Dead people could still vote. Criminals in jail could vote. That is, if blue states even have jails or prisons anymore. Maybe blue states would let kids vote too. I mean, why not? If the left says children can chop off their parents or chop off their genitals and breasts, surely the left would let them make permanent, important adult decisions like voting. Things like what the sheriff of San Joaquin County is talking about could be legal, like apparently it must be in California. Now, she quoted a tweet from the San Joaquin County Sheriff's Office here. Shh, don't call it even a voting irregularity. That never happens in our free, safe, and fair elections, right? Imagine if America decided to just go ahead and have a national divorce. Hollywood elites and celebrities and all the brainwashed leftists, women who watch the nasty women on The View, men who identify as women, and Democrat voters who suffered from a lifelong debilitating disease known as Trump derangement syndrome that they caught from CNN wouldn't have to see, much less tolerate, deplorables anymore. They could live in their safe space blue states, own nothing, let their government decide and control everything, and most importantly, protect their fragile minds from being shocked and insulted by those of us on the right who believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Then Americans could choose which way, left or right, provides them with the best quality of life, and we don't have to argue with one another anymore. I'm starting to feel like it's the right thing to do for everyone. End of thread. The reaction to this thread clearly indicates that most people have not thought her proposal through. Now, I don't think she's thought the matter through either, but I'll get to that later. For instance, one user says her proposal sounds like something out of The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I have a link to that tweet in the description, but I would have to say, false. The Greene proposal would limit the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court so that kind of thing cannot happen. I'm going to leave 3 links to a thread that shows exactly how bitter the left-right divide already is. You start with someone embedding a results by county map of what I assume is the election of 2020. The point is that if you try to draw international boundaries, you cut off some red areas, particularly by the state of Vermont. Again, that person doesn't read the thread. We're not talking about international boundaries. Now hold that thought. I'm going to get back to it. One conservative said he'd move in a heartbeat, and that's when another user called all conservatives traitors. Follow the second and third tweets if you must, but you won't miss much. I also have links to 2 reactions that probably speak correctly to the mindset of the left. One person said the blue states would be begging to join the red states, and the other said that blues don't want their own country because they want to rule it all. Again, Marjorie Taylor Greene did not propose carving up the country the way Lord Mountbatten had to carve up India and Pakistan. Someone else said he was all set to move to Idaho, make that greater Idaho. And another said he supported Texit, just a flat-out clean secession. And again, that's not what she proposed. So what did she propose? Simply this: severe limits on federal authority and scope of activity. Most cabinet departments would disappear, with state government taking over their functions completely, without federal interference. Figure on four federal departments remaining: State, Treasury, Defense, and Justice. The Bureau of the Census would move from Commerce to State. Immigration Services would move to State, but Immigration and Customs Enhancement would move to Defense, Agriculture, and Interior. Move to Defense. Agriculture and Interior would disappear. States would manage their own interiors, but she didn't think of the Native American reservations. Those regulations might literally become their own countries. Think Bufo-Thatswana, Transkei, and Siskei before the fall of the Afrikaners in South Africa. The privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States would be weaker. This would require a constitutional amendment, placing enforcement of the Bill of Rights upon the states beyond the jurisdiction of the federal courts or the power of Congress. Now, some things, like voter qualifications, should be beyond the jurisdiction of the courts or powers of Congress. But decisions like Bruin on gun rights and Carson on religious rights, they would go away. ATF would disappear, but blue states would eagerly replace its functions. Interstate travel could see far greater state government intrusions, and under national divorce terms, the federal government could not interfere. So you would see truckway stations working 24 hours a day, random or even universal mandatory car searches, looking not necessarily for drugs, but for guns. blue states, and maybe some red, laying and collecting imposts and duties on imports and exports and keeping the money. Maybe to keep those way stations going. Or how about blue states printing their own money? Though maybe red states could coin gold and silver. Blue states would lay and collect exit taxes on residents and businesses moving out, or forbid moving out. Well, that follows logically from them keeping their ESG regulations. Red states would respect religion, and blue states would completely disrespect it. As Greene admitted. Now, what would happen to movements like Greater Idaho? Well, today the state of Oregon might cede 2/3 of its territory to Idaho only to solve a fiscal crisis. Under national divorce, states could print their own money. No matter, no crisis, no incentive, no deal. But if they forbid people to move or simply confiscate the land as an exit tax, well, that could cause an explosion. They might want to avoid that and let those lands go just to keep the promise. Given the temperament of blue state leadership, the blue states might see their populations decline totally within 2 generations. Then populations of red states might move in and establish proper constitutional government in those states. Indeed, Todd Starnes predicted that, and I paraphrase. Red states would have all the food and guns, and their women folk would actually be women. Those paraphrase. But Starnes got one thing wrong. Marjorie Taylor Greene did not propose a moratorium on migrants from blue states. She's mentioned durational residency before, but not this time. Ladies and gentlemen, we can do better than this. Abolish all but 4 departments? You betcha. But why don't we strengthen the protections of the Bill of Rights instead of weakening them? That means red state governments and red county sheriffs would nullify intrusive laws and precedents. It definitely requires overruling a few Supreme Court precedents, like Dunn versus Blumstein, which I mentioned before, and Reynolds versus Sims, which requires states to draw Senate districts evened out by population. Overrule that, and states could appoint 1 senator per county. County, parish, independent city, whatever. I've left links in the description to both those cases so that you can see what I'm talking about. If demography is destiny, that applies also to the total fertility rate, which is demonstrably higher in conservative women than in liberal women. So as long as the red states protect fertility, conservatives win. But the national divorce proposal has deep flaws and will enshrine curtailments of civil liberties. Then again, leftist politicians have no room to complain about proposals like this, not when they disrespect freedom of religion, self-armament, and the right to life itself. Link in the description of the article to Harry Raghavan's thread and reactions to it, to MTG's first discussion of national divorce, to the thread she dropped 2 days ago, to reactions to that, to those 2 Supreme Court cases I mentioned, to my Declarations of Truth Twitter account, and to Conservative News and Views. I've also left links to the awesome CNAV Store and or silverlines.com, as I also mentioned. You know already about how to like a video, turn on notifications, and leave a tip. On the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link to my channel and links to earlier videos I've done on the Great Sortation and what other influencers have said about MTG's proposal. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.